Hey, welcome back to Unleashing the Baseball Mindset. This is our fourth podcast. And Dylan, I didn't check the stats recently, but I think we're up to a million views. Is that right?
Something like that. It's right around
Yes,
that. Yeah.
it's pretty close to that. But
Yeah.
we're growing. We're growing, and that's the
We're
point.
growing.
And everybody liked Chris so much, we decided to get him back, and he tried charging us to come back. Sent over a contract. No, not at all. But it's a pleasure to have Chris back. And today we have the topic we plan on talking about is the conversation or conversations that can occur between the coach, the players, and the parents during a season that might not be really going the way everybody has planned. And one of the things I looked up, and that was, Dylan comes up with the great topic ideas most of the time. But I looked up some information on that, like I do, and I found it interesting that there is a lot of actually published research about poor communication between coaches and parents. To where parents, they say about 30% of parents feel like they would like to have more or more regular communication with coaches. And so I kind of found that interesting. I'm just curious what you guys' thoughts are, both on conversations in general during not that we like to use this word on the podcast, but during a losing season, and then just amount of communication between coaches and parents. What do you think?
Let me start with that because I'm going to talk about something that's going to go straight into. When I point that way, does it go to Chris?
No.
It doesn't? So this
Your
way?
fingers pointing at Chris.
There you
No.
go.
On my screen, he's that way. All right. So I'm so glad you brought that up because. So let's go back. So last season, spring, summer, pretty good season. About midway through the season, once again, as me and Chris were just talking about before you got on, Kyle, is we got into a lull mid-season. So I called a meeting with the parents. I noticed that I was seeing a lot of kids that weren't necessarily progressing, and they admitted to not doing the work at home that I give them homework. Every single Tuesday and Wednesday, I give them homework. Thursday is our strength and conditioning day and isolated like workouts. So I went over with them the things that we had been doing during the Tuesday practices and Wednesday practices that they needed to be going over, and they weren't doing it at home. So I said, that's where I see a lot of the misses that we're seeing in games is coming from the exact training that we're doing Tuesday and Wednesdays, because it's all based on the tournament or tournaments previous to what those practices are. And so, I got a little bit of pushback. I got some people that were backing me up. It's always that way. You're kind of half and half. And so anyway, we go through the season. By the end of the season, I was so frustrated. I was in honestly, and this is crazy, I'm sure to you, Kyle, but Chris understands it. Well, I talked to you about it too, Kyle. I was depressed. Like, I was severely depressed. Now, I did have two teams at the time. My younger team, I knew that I was going to have to stop coaching them pretty soon because I needed to focus on my older kids. So that did play a little bit into it. But the lack of want to and fire goes back to what we talked about last week, really wanting to compete that I saw.
The kids?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about the kids are.
Yeah. It really got me down, and it was it wasn't just those, but it was a multiple of things, but it all had to do with baseball, and it was tearing my life apart. It was ruining my family life. I wasn't working out. I wasn't, it was like I'd go to work, go to baseball, go to sleep, go to work, go to baseball, go to sleep. No family time. It was just ruining me. So that's when I made that call to Chris. We had a long talk for a couple of days, and him and his wife kind of helped me kind of get me back into it, get me back on pace, get me back into my right frame of mind where I needed to be. But there was a lot of things that I took from Chris that he told me that made a lot of sense. And one of the things that I think with youth baseball versus maybe high school that I do agree with Chris is there needs to be a lack of communication to the parents, because it's preparing them for what's coming, right? You're not going to have meetings with parents in high school, and that's 2 years away for these boys. You're not going to have meetings with parents in college, right? And so my idea is getting these boys to become young men and learn how to communicate for themselves because that's who it's all about anyway. It's not about the parents. It's not about what the parents want for their kids. It's not about how many tournaments their parents want to play or want to win. It's about are the are these boys truly happy? Are they passionate? Do they want to get better? Are they upset about something? It should be a conversation with the coaches and the boys. So that's where I kinda lie on it now, and where it's actually gotten better for me, and I'm in a better mindset going into practices and tournaments, not communicating with the parents as much. So okay.
Well, let me, and I hate to like jump in here before you, Chris, but let me just read benefits of frequent coach parent communication, improved athlete outcomes, trust and predictability, conflict reduction. Risk of insufficient communication, there's a negative athlete experience, parental dissatisfaction, and then that creates barriers to collaboration. And of course, all of that we could go in deeper with
Now what
each of those, not that we need to.
is there an age group or, like, what exactly is that based off of?
Very good question. This is just kind of a
I know it's a good
surface level
question.
review. I can mute you for the rest of the
I
time.
mean
I don't think I won't. No, that's a good question. I haven't dug into the studies, right? So the way I have a little review here, and there's about 14 different studies kind of on this topic, but I've not dug into those. But anyway, so I'm just throwing that
okay.
out there to where I hear what you're saying. But if you take a look at this collection of research, and we've already talked about pros and cons of research in general, but
Yeah,
just the
yeah.
data that's out there, that's kind of what we hear.
Yeah, it's good to hear that, Kyle. And that's interesting because I agree with Dylan. I think what age group are they talking about? Because as I've learned now, having gone through literally every age group from T-ball or before to high school, is that it is different age to age. My son's in high school now. There is no communication with the parents at all. Zero. I mean, I don't know that they really care if we're even there. um, you know, and I was a little nervous about that at first. So let me back up on the youth side with our team. At the time, I mean, we communicated everything, every detail. Um, tell them what color jerseys to wear. Send them a picture of the jersey so that they didn't wear last year's blue jersey. Tell them what park we're playing at. Here are the directions to the park. Here's a map because we're on field 3. We just communicated everything. And Dylan's right. As coaches, we're giving the parents what they want, but we're not really doing any justice to the kids. At 7 years old is fine, right? But as they get older, I mean, I had to have a talk with my son, this year going into high school, because not only did we communicate everything to the parents, but in his case, I was the coach. So he really didn't need to know anything. I had it covered. I knew everything. And I had to tell him, like, listen, you got to pay attention. I'm not your coach anymore. I don't know what uniform you're wearing. I don't know what time you need to be there. I don't know anything. They're not telling. And so, yeah, I mean, if we're being good coaches, we need to do what Dylan said, and as they get older, back off of the communication with the parents. I realize, and I agree with the study you're talking about. You are going to probably have some dissatisfaction there. Does that necessarily mean maybe that's okay? Maybe that's just what it is.
And I think some of it kind of goes back to what, and this did kind of pop up whenever I was looking at stuff, to where, yeah, like we have this right here where parents say that they want this apparently, but do they necessarily need it? Because you can look again at other stuff to where parents are actually too involved, right? And that they're too involved in a different way. It's a less supportive way than it used to be, and it's much more performance based. And then that is also impacting the athlete experience negatively. So it's and kind of goes back to the whole research thing in general, like the way this is, and we'd have to look up the questions that were asked and stuff like that. We kind of see both. We see that okay, parents want this, but however, we also see that parents are kind of in there a little too much in some cases and not really in the most supportive way. So what's the best?
I
I
think
don't know.
another thing too, when you get into that over communication piece, because this is where was I was overly communicating with parents and talking to them on the phones all the time. And you get into that mode of naturally giving them what they want. right? So let's say you have 11 kids on your team, 12 kids on your team, and more as they get older. You're talking to all these parents, and inevitably, you're going to like some of them more because you just get along with them better, or you click with them more, right? And then it starts to steer your decisions, right? And it could just be subconsciously. You're not even thinking, you're not even consciously thinking about it. But when you're writing lineups, when you're pitching pitchers, all that kind of stuff, it starts to veer you into maybe the wrong direction because you're constantly talking to those people. And some parents are going to want to talk to you more than the others. And if you like them, then they become your friend. And it's like that's where I learned, in talking to Chris, where I was going wrong was that, and I didn't even realize I was doing it, but I was developing these personal relationships with parents where I really shouldn't have been doing that. It should have been only with the boys, you know?
Dylan, let me say, and the only reason I was able to give you that advice is because I did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Exact same thing. And, by the time you realize that it's too late,
Yeah.
you've already made the mistake. I'm not sure either of you could understand the depth of that mistake that I made with some of the parents. And let me tell you, 100% it influences your decision. Subconsciously. I never consciously sat down to make out a lineup and said, well, I'm going to do this because this dad.
Yeah.
Like no way, but it 100% happens subconsciously. Yeah. I'll tell, no names here, but my other coach, Chad, who hopefully we get on here one day. We had a game where this exact thing, more than halfway through the season, was playing out, and there was a mental mistake made by one of the players, and I didn't understand it in the moment because I'd been working with him on this thing, and I just coaches talking to each other in the dugout, and I turned to Chad and I said, yeah, I don't understand what it's going to take to get him to learn this. We've worked so much on this, and he shrugged his shoulders, and he said, or maybe he's just not the position he was playing. I don't even want to say it.
Yeah, I get it.
And I'm going to tell you, the split second that Chad said that, it occurred to me, you're right. And I have him there. I thought he was, but no, I think maybe you're right. Maybe he's not that guy. So yeah, I mean, you got to be careful. And I think some parents are different. This is not a blanket statement for all of them, but I think some of them you definitely have to question their motivation. As coaches, the influence on us happens subconsciously. Maybe on some parents it's also subconscious, but I think on some of them it's absolutely conscious.
Yeah,
that they're doing it for that reason.
Well, Dylan and I have talked about this quite a bit before, and me being a young athlete's parent, which I know y'all are as well, or have been. Like for my kid, right? So I get emotional watching him play, and I want to tell the coach things, and I want to do this, but I always think like, well, I'm not the annoying parent, right? I'm different. But where I'm going with this though is, I realize that I don't like to see my son sad or hurt. And so a lot of my motivation to try to intervene or talk to the coach or do this or do that, or even to, yell something at Caden when he's playing, a lot of my motivation is not that I want him to win, not performance based. I just don't want him to be sad. So I think like I know how important it is for him to lose and do this or do that. But man, I hate it whenever he drops his head after he strikes out. So then I start to get more involved for that reason. I don't know if that really makes any sense, but just kind of thinking about, I think parents' motivation comes from a good place. I just don't think they demonstrate it very well, me included.
Totally agree. I mean, I think as parents, our instinct is and should be to protect our kids. We want to do that. We want to protect them from everything. But there's this line where you have to figure out, and maybe none of us have figured it out, where I want to protect them, but I also need them to learn how to protect themselves, because maybe I'm not going to be here every day. As parents or coaches, we do want to teach, but we also want to prepare kids to do things without us, and baseball is such a game of emotions, like we talked about last week with these life lessons, learning how to process those emotions. I mean, that's part. I have days of the week where I'm sad, and I got to deal with that, and so I mean, you never want to see your kid hurt, But as a parent, I think you do have to just ask yourself, what do I need to do in this moment? A little bit of struggle is okay for these kids, even emotionally.
Yeah, I really think it too. My son's six. I think the very best thing for him and his team is to lose. If they could lose every single game, like to teach them that losing is not that big of a deal. But of course, whenever we get there at the games, I don't necessarily feel that way. So yeah, I think that's the tough part of all of it. But getting into losing or maybe having a losing season and that type of communication. So maybe think first, or what I'm wondering first is like, what type of communication do y'all employ just with the athletes, so not the parents, but starting with the athletes during that type of a season? And Dylan, this was your question. I don't know if you
Yeah.
want to start off or you want me to sport off sports psych stuff. Spit off.
Well, so I can kind of tell you where my question came from, and then you can, give all your research and all that, stuff. So with the clinic, the mental performance clinic that we did, with the changes in coaching, few different things that we did in the off season, and like we talked about, seeing measurable results within weeks of the clinic and them starting to do their homework and all that, and then going into the season a month later into higher level of competition, which it's funny because parents a lot of times see higher level of competition as, even if it's a majors or a triple A team, if they think, or if I think, because I do the same thing, if I think we're better than that team and we lose to them, it's discouraging. But what I keep having to tell myself is these boys are playing at a higher level, and they have been since day one of this season. So not only is it better competition, it may not, it may not be better competition sometimes, but at the end of the day, in their little minds, they're feeling that they're playing higher level competition all the time because now they're open, they're in majors and AAA and all that stuff, right? So I think one of the talking points to them, or I don't think, but one of the talking points that I've made over and over again is like, look, guys, we're progressing. We're close to like a 500 season. We're not, having a super, great season, but at the same time, we're progressing from where we were last season. And for me, I'm okay with that. I'm not satisfied with it. I'm okay with it. But at the same time, we are progressing. So that's pretty much the speaking points that I give to the kids, is like, I keep confirming that, and I'll give scenarios that they're progressing in, right? We're better at pitching, our hitting average as a team, our on base percentage as a team, everything's gone up, but we're losing some games, you know, and, parents and kids are frustrated with that. And I get it, because I'm frustrated with it too. But at the same time, I got to realize, hey, we're progressing. And the state of the game right now is, if we don't have a winning season and we don't get rings every weekend, we go into another team. And that's just kind of how it is right now, unfortunately. And honestly, Chris, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before the podcast, is these kids have been playing all year round.
Yeah.
So what are we supposed to expect? If we're still making progress, good Lord, like that's crazy.
Let me say this. I mean, it goes back to the original question, I think, and then, to what you're talking about, Dylan. I think in order to answer the question of, how do we communicate to kids? How do we communicate to parents? And based on what Kyle said, a losing season, right? So I think we might have mentioned this last week. You have to define success first. What is success? Is it our win-loss record? It can be any metric that you want it to be. Are we basing it off of wins and losses? Or are we not? I'll tell you, from our perspective as coaches, it has nothing to do with wins and losses. Zero. Our stance always was on our winning record, wins and losses, was as long as we're a game or two above 500, we're right where we need to be, because we have endless options of different levels to compete at, right? And if we can drop down a level and go 45-0, if that's what, but no one's getting better, right? But is that success? We're undefeated. or we can, jump up a level and not win anything, but we're playing a high level. We're competing our butts off. We're having a lot of small victories. The scoreboard doesn't show it, but we just played great, but is that failure? As a coach, absolutely not.
Right.
But here's the problem. I think there's an inherent, and I don't know if this will ever be solved. There's an inherent disconnect between parents and coaches. What is the definition of success? And again, nothing I say is ever a blanket statement. But I think that's the problem. I mean, we had parents that just want to win. They just want to get the ring. And if we drop down and play double A and we win and we're undefeated, well, then that's great. That's what they wanted. We have other parents that, didn't. They would rather go get our butts beat at a higher level because there was the success was in being at the majors level. I'm not saying either one's right or wrong, but there's a disconnect even between parents, and then a bigger disconnect between those parents and the coaches. And here's, the disconnect is highlighted for me by the fact, and Dylan, I'm sure you can say the same thing. And if we ask 100 coaches, I think all 100 of them would say this at any level. Is who are your best parents? Just historically speaking, who are your best parents that you've had, right? They are, in my case, they're the parents that played baseball, played sports regardless, but particularly baseball, because they probably see things the same way I do. I mean, some moments over the last 8 years where, the feedback from the parents is pretty negative, but I have same group of parents, but if you take the baseball, I'm just going to say dads, right? You take the baseball dads in that parent group, and their feedback's 180-degree different than the other feedback.
Yeah.
Because they see it the same way we do. I even have a grandparent on our team that I've known since I was a kid, and I had lunch with him 2 days ago this week. And, consistently over the years, he just kept reminding me, Coach, I watch. He never missed a game. Y'all are doing everything perfect, and I would say, yeah, but the parents are saying this, and he said, I don't care. They don't know what they're talking about. I mean,
That's good.
To a large extent, that's true, and I don't want to attack parents. I am a parent, but it's the reality of it,
Yeah.
It's a hard question to answer unless we decide how we're going to measure success. What is the success that we're talking about? And then you can, sort of go down that rabbit.
I think, and then you one more thing to spin off of that is you also have the situation where if you lose in the high level and then you drop down to the lower level, you start winning, then we should be playing at a higher level. So you get that too, is like you're competing and you're winning some games at the higher level, but let's say you're at a 500, just above, just below, whatever, a 500 season, and then you drop down to get the kids some wins, get their confidence up. Well, all of a sudden then it's like, no, my kid needs to be playing for a higher level. And then it's like, that's a no-win situation.
Yeah. Let me tell you this little story that literally was yesterday. Same theory here that we're talking about. I was talking to Chad, okay, and we're talking about Chad's, again, he'll be on here at some point, but Major League Baseball player, right? High level of success. Growing up, not only did he play, but he was probably, from what I'm told, an even better basketball player at one point in his life. So he and I were talking yesterday about him playing basketball and him playing baseball, junior high, high school. And his exact words to me, he said, Chris, I don't think if I hadn't played basketball, I don't think I'd become the baseball player that I did. And here's why. It's what you're talking about, I think. In our day, Baton Rouge high school basketball at the time was also pretty competitive, right?
Yeah.
Some big old boys that will push you around, right? And so what Chad said is, on the baseball field, all I did was win. It was easy for him, right? He never failed on a baseball field, ever. He was that good. He said basketball is the only place I ever got punched in the mouth, literally and figuratively. But it was being punched in the mouth that having those losses, right? He didn't always succeed on a basketball court. He had more losses maybe than he had wins, and he doesn't become the baseball player he did without, had he just stayed at the, we'll parallel this to the, we can jump down to AA or AAA and we can just win all of our games. And we just do nothing to win. So this is straight out of a big leaguer's mouth. If all I ever did was just win on a baseball field, then I don't become the big leaguer that I did. I mean, I just think that's kind of powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, look, I want to say this before I forget, just with the overall question. And back to my belief that there's this inherent disconnect between parents and coaches that on a lot of levels will just never go away. It's part of the game. I think as coaches, and I'm not saying every coach is great and every parent is wrong, but I think as coaches, it's our responsibility and our obligation to continue to subscribe to what we believe is correct and the way we believe we should be coaching. And if the parents don't agree with that, then I'm sorry. Maybe you do need to find another team. This is how I'm going to coach. This is what I think. I think that the minute we start to cater to the parents to the point that we go against what we think as people that grew up in the game, and then I think that's where we're doing the kids a major disservice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wonder, so that there's a lot there. So if we talk about communication strategies with the kids initially, again, most of the, from a sports psychology side, the conversation we would want to have is much more on being process oriented and not outcome oriented, right? So it doesn't matter if you win or lose, and this just goes along with what you both said. It doesn't really matter that you win or lose, but you're focusing on the process, right? You're swinging better, your body position's great, like you're doing all these good things. And if you continually reinforce that, and if you build a culture that reinforces effort over outcome, then win-loss doesn't matter as much. But then you get to the parents. And what I'm wondering is, could there be something in the beginning of the season, maybe it's a contract or something, where it's a communication to where you're outlining, that we are process oriented. This is how we define success. Are they giving effort? Are they continuously improving? Or whatever the case may be. And then it would get to, just like you said, Chris, a lot of parents aren't going to like that for whatever reason. So then they just, their kid just needs to go play for someone else. Is that something that could happen? And I feel like Dylan might have a little bit more restriction than you, Chris. But again, just like a contract that they sign, and success is clearly defined, and it does not involve winning or losing.
Yeah, in theory, you definitely could have that. I don't know that it. I mean, all that does as a coach is give you something, to fall back on when they still do complain, and you can say, well, I mean, I told you how it was going to be. You even signed a piece of paper understanding it. I don't think that that's going to necessarily remove the possibility that they are unhappy at some point. I think it's more of, like I was just saying, as a coach, you have a plan and don't deviate from it. Don't change your style because the parents want something different. If what you're doing, in your opinion, is working, whether they see it or not, don't change. I'll say this. I mean, in terms of parent communication or confrontation, we always had a policy that never changed, which was, number one, 24-hour rule. If you're upset, call me tomorrow. Don't meet me behind the dugout right after the game, because I have emotions too. The truth is, I don't like, we're not measuring, as far as the kids go, we're not measuring this based on the wins or losses, but I don't like losing. So let's not talk right now. But call me tomorrow. And so 24-hour rule, and you ask me any question you want. There's no limit to what you can ask me. But the only thing you're going to get from me is an honest answer, whether you like it or not. I'll be honest with you. Now, the other coach was much better at that than me. I mean, I tend to kind of soften it a little bit, and, I don't like to hurt feelings, but that doesn't work either. It's a better policy to give them the honest answer. At least half the time, they're probably not going to like it, but that's all we can do is give you the honest answer.
Yeah, and I answer to your question, Kyle. I have my own contract, and it says all of that, but it doesn't matter what you write on that paper. I mean,
Right.
it's the same. It's the same thing as like not coaching from the stands. Are you still going to have parents that coach from the stands? Yes. You just have to keep going back after you can't do that. Stop doing that. And eventually it may get them cut from the team. I mean, it happens. So.
Oh, let me. I don't know how this is going to come out, or if it's even going to answer some of this. Once again, talking about the differences between myself and Chad as the main two coaches over the years. We had different styles. I was the guy that made the mistakes, getting too friendly with the parents, right, and doing all that we talked about, softening the answer to the question a little bit, telling them what they wanted to hear, and trying to disguise in there the truth too. Chad was not that. He was exactly what we're saying you should be, which is friendly with the parents, but not going to cross the lines like I did. And he is going to give you the honest answer. Like it or not, you're getting the honest answer. And what happened was, as a result of that, the parents don't want to say anything to him.
Yep.
They're scared of him. I'm the one that had to catch the brunt of it.
Yep.
Because they knew if they said it to him, he was going to give them the honest answer. I believe in most cases they already know the answer. They just don't want to. They want you to tell them something other than what they already know. They're seeing it too, but they want, as a coach, for you to say, no. He's pretty good. He's going to be fine. And so, best policy now through my mistakes is like I said, what Chad would do was exactly what he said he would do. I'll give you the honest answer. And it mitigated 90% of it because they didn't want to ask him the question.
Yep.
In fact, I used to get, I fielded some complaints about lineup decisions when I wasn't the one making the lineup.
Yeah. I have it happens to me all the time. They'll go, so we have in the contract, do not ever go to an assistant coach. You have a question, call me the next day. We'll talk about it, or we'll meet in person and talk about it, because I'd rather that more so than talking on the phone. And multiple times they go to assistant coaches.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to ask me.
Right.
And they're afraid of the answer.
That's the better approach, I think. Communication with parents. That's the better approach, in my opinion. Just be honest, stay honest, don't deviate. You're still going to get some of these questions, but you're nipping a lot of it in the bud because they're never going to ask. That's the reality. It became a joke with our group that no one would go to Chad with anything because they were scared of him.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're really scared, but they were scared of the answer they were going to get. That's the truth.
Right.
And whenever I mention something like a contract, and Dylan, I know to your point, it's not that people are really going to follow it, but it's awareness, like awareness in the beginning of the season, so that you can be more honest throughout the season. You can know that each and every parent had the opportunity to look at this, whether they did or not, was on them. And I'm not saying that really would make parents, I think it would actually smooth things over, if it was a conversation that was held in some way or the other. But I know how people can be, and even with contracts, it doesn't matter how legal they are, it can be easy to get out of them. But what about, if you want to, if you don't mind, turning more to conversations with the athletes during a losing season? If there's anything there that you've seen. Again, I fall back on a lot of the stuff with like being process oriented, focusing on the daily things that you're working on rather than outcomes. But have you ever noticed like increased dropout rates from athletes if you try to do that, or just lower retention, or maybe in the sport just the way it is, kids don't really quit? Parents might make decisions and pull them out, but maybe the kids themselves usually stay there. Anything there?
Yeah, no, look, I'll jump in real quick. I think in our case, the conversations with the kids was so much easier, right? Because it was an ongoing conversation. There was never an end to the conversation. It started day one and it went through the end of the season. And it was every practice, every game, every pitch, inning. I believe that the kids understood to every degree what the measures of success were that we were looking for. And we didn't have a team meeting after the game and say, well, you won, good job, or you lost, bad job. They were that may have been something that we mentioned at the end of, if you ask the parents, a 45-minute team meeting is really about 3 minutes. But, the boys understood every moment of the game, right? And they understood when they made a mental mistake, when they did well and had success. And so the coaching or the conversations, communication on success was so much easier in our case because, they understood it. Frankly, they understand it way better than the parents do. I mean, the parents are not privy to every conversation or bit of coaching that these boys are getting. And so for me, I don't know that there's a secret or a difference between communicating with the boys versus the parents, other than that it's just a lot easier because I'm way more connected to the boys than I am the parents.
A lot of times too, I think, as parents, we tend to only see through the lens of our kids, and they don't, a lot of times, it's like, well, you get on my kid too much, or you're not spending enough time with my kid, or whatever the thing is. And a lot of times they don't see, and I think that's the biggest disconnect, is they don't see the individual meetings that we have thousands and thousands of times. They don't hear what we're saying during the practice thousands and thousands of times. And I think if you go into a season and you trust the coach and you believe what the coach is saying because they're a sincere and genuine person, and I think most parents are pretty good at reading that, like, you've got to trust the process, and you have to know, like, all you got to do is open your eyes a little bit and see how many individual conversations we're having with these kids. But for whatever reason, they don't. And that's where I think one of my biggest frustrations in the past is, like, I spend so much time with specific kids because I need to, and it's like they don't see it. They don't see those individual talks, those constant, trying to pick them back up when they're getting down on themselves or whatever it is. And I don't know if there's a way to correct that, or that's just the way it is, and it'll always be that way.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at. I mean, as time goes on, I hate it, but I'm becoming of the mindset that it's never going to change. It's just the way it is. I mean, I can remember vividly, telling some parents, I would text their kids these days, right? Bits of coaching, positive things. And I would say, grab your son's phone and look at the text that I send him. Look at I communicated with every one of my players on text messaging, and I would, as a parent, go look at it. You should be looking at it anyway. He's, 11 years old or 12 or whatever. But, you'll understand a little bit more of this coach-player relationship if you'll read the messages between us back and forth. It kind of just give you, I think we would get a little more grace as coaches if they knew what you're talking about, Dylan. And they don't, and I don't even know that if there's a want for them to know. I mean, like, they don't want to know. I don't think I don't know that they really want to understand. I think not to pivot, but this is a point that I want to make for this. And I've been thinking as we're talking, is not to equate it quite to a marriage, right? But I think if you're a parent and I think you need to be on the same lines as the coach. There's thousands of coaches out there, and many of them have different styles, right? Dylan and I are probably the same, but there's other guys. If you don't like our style, if you don't like the ideals that we have, there's somebody out there that does. See it the way you see it as a parent. Go play for that guy, because it's gonna be better for everybody if you're matched up as a parent with a coach that you align with. And maybe I'm not that guy. It doesn't mean I'm wrong. It just means, you don't see things the way I do.
Yeah.
How would a parent do that? I mean, like, do y'all interview the parents, or have a meeting to see how things go? Or
I interview the parents more than I interview the kids.
Yeah,
100%. Whenever I'm recruiting. You know?
Yeah, we do the same thing. But if we had so we never had open tryouts for our team. We were trying out one, maybe two kids at a time because we never had a bunch of spots open. So in our case, I would go work with the player and I would go talk to the parent.
Yep.
And I'm interviewing the parent. I don't know if they knew. I didn't tell them that's what I was doing.
Right.
I mean, we're coaches. We're not dumb. I'm getting scouting reports on parents too.
Yep.
This your fourth team in 3 years. What's going on with that?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, right or wrong, it's if as a parent, if you just don't like the coach, well, then none of these other things we're talking about it's not gonna be a good experience for you as a parent if you don't like the coach to begin with. So don't play for that guy. There's so many organizations, there's so many teams. I don't even know about where you are, Dylan. I mean, there's a lot here in my little small town. And so I mean, I think as a parent, you should interview coaches. I have no problem. I don't know that any parent, maybe a couple did, but they asked us very few questions when they're thinking about joining our team or before the season. Ask me, what's your philosophy on this? What do you think about this? How are you going to handle that? They don't ask that. They just wait until you do it the wrong way, and then they have a problem with it. Well, if you'd asked me before you joined the team, I would have told you this is what we're going to do. So
I like that.
That's a good point, especially about the coaching philosophy. More parents asking about that. Has there ever been a time when the parent was right? Like, oh, hey, little Johnny actually is wearing his glove backwards. Sorry about that. Thanks for pointing it out.
That never happened.
Maybe just on our team.
Little Johnny showed up with a softball glove one day, but no. Although I can't recall an instance. I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say no. Parents are wrong 100% of the time. Of course they're not. Like I said, for me, it's less about right or wrong, and it's more about just the disconnect of what is that success? What are we chasing here? And that's where the problems come in that I see between coaches and parents is that disconnect. It's not necessarily where the parents were right this time, the coaches were right this time, because hey, it's baseball. If you want to play percentages, coaches are right. Coaches are batting just shy of 1,000, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, and you talk about the communication too, and you mentioned the thing about equating it to a marriage, but it seems like a lot of it would come down to trust, to where the parent just needs to trust that the coach is doing what needs to be done. And maybe something is missed. Like I noticed this right at my son's games, and like, well, there's this one kid or a couple of kids that just act like absolute clowns. And I think, like, why are they even out there, right? Most of these kids want to play. They actually want to compete, and you have a couple that it's actually their first time, and they are still putting the dirt in the glove or something. But then, it's not my job to point that out to the coach. I need to trust that the coach sees it, or he sees this, or he sees that, or he will eventually, and it's not really anything for me to worry about. And the same with my son. I trust that he sees what needs to be seen with my son, and he will intervene the way it needs to be done, and I don't need to say anything about it.
Yeah, and and again, we talked about this last week, I know. So not to go back to that, but it's that back to the what age are we talking about? Because the philosophies are different and need to be different year to year. So much of these things we're talking about. If little Johnny wants to put his glove on the wrong hand at 6U, I don't really care. It's okay. Like, that's fine. No, we're gonna get a snowball either way when this game's over. Just but as they get older, it has to evolve as the kids get older. I don't know where I was going with that, but it's hard to apply any of the stuff we talk about. It's a different answer for depending on the age group. That's just what it is. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of something else to add here, but I don't know. What else you got? What else?
I don't know. I guess whenever it comes to communication strategies, I tend to go back to that a lot. But again, for me, and then some of the stuff I do, it's shifting that communication right to where back to the process, right, and actually teaching them that you're there to learn, you're there to grow, you're there to do all these other things, and not necessarily just win at baseball. But it sounds like too that's a theme that is sort of integrated throughout the games, the practices, and stuff like that.
Let me add this. It just popped into my head. So, the difference between the communication with the coach to player and coach to parent. One of the things as coaches that all good coaches do with their athlete, and not necessarily with their parents, is make sure that player knows his successes. There's a lot of coaching involved in letting them know what they did do well, right? Coaching is not every play telling them what they did wrong. It's as much or more the things you did well. And let's build on that. And that happens a lot between coach and player. It's constant, right? I'm not going to every parent or any parent after the game and saying, hey, little Johnny did this so good, he did this great, but I am telling those players, you talked about your son being sad or, having a long face, and you don't want that. Well, that coach needs to identify that. And, what did he do well? I'm going to give you a real world example of 6 days ago. My son, high school player, we're doing fall ball. And he's had a great fall. Last weekend, not so good. Play a doubleheader, and just wasn't his day. I did not know it at the time that he was having a migraine, black spots in his peripheral, severe headache in the dugout. Probably was affecting, his ability. That's why he swung and missed the ball a lot. But he pitched the last inning of the game, and he pitched really, really well. And he came out of the dugout. And mind you, these are the first games he's ever played in his life where I wasn't in the dugout with him. And I noticed the look in his eyes when he looked at me was terror of, what are you about to tell me? And I didn't even know. And what came out of my mouth was, man, you pitched really well today. That was fun to watch. And that's all I said. And we started walking, and we talked about how well he pitched from the field all the way to the car. And then we get about 10 minutes down the road, and I was content with that being the end of it. And he said, Dad, starts telling me why he thinks he might have, couldn't hit the ball today. And I said, well, I mean, I don't know. I have some ideas. If you want me to tell you, I will, and we were able to have a much better conversation because I let him bring it up. As a coach, my instinct in that moment was to tell him what he did well, right? And I think all coaches do that, and the parents don't see it. They just don't. They're not aware. I'm not saying they're wrong. They don't see it. They're not there for every conversation that we have with our players. And so you don't see those moments where, and every player on my team is different. They all have different personalities. I have to deal with each one of them differently. If you have the benefit of coaching kids year to year, the better you get to know them, the more that you know that. And that's what we do as coaches. And that's why I think those conversations you're talking about with the boys in this case, I said they're easier because it's an ongoing conversation that I'm aware of and that kid is aware of. Parents get bits and pieces of it that aren't even bits and pieces. So anyway, that's what I have to say on that, I guess.
That reminded me of something that came from Coach John Wooden. He was with UCLA, probably the winningest coach of all time. I can't really remember his stats. But he had this thing where he said, and it's directly aligned with what you're saying, to where he says, let me see if I can remember this right. He said like all of the players, all of the athletes are like a mixed cream of whipped cream and shit, if I can say that on our podcast here. And he said it's the coach's job to figure out how much of each they have. So if you have somebody that's a little too full of whipped cream, it's the coach's job to mix in a little shit. But if it's, say, you have a player that's much the other side, then it's the coach's job to mix in a little whipped cream. But we also see that in the sports psych research to where that can change per game too. So again, it's the coach's job to kind of know a little bit about the player, but then also know, like if you just barely lost a game, let's say, then you can be a little bit more critical, and it's okay. Or if they win and they win by big numbers or whatever, be even more critical, because that starts to level those emotions. But if it's just a blowout or whatever, then maybe we're not critical at all today. It's all about, like what you said you did with your son. So yeah, it just kind of made me think of that. So we're trying to just balance out emotions throughout the season.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, I think coaches by and large do a phenomenal job at that, and it's not difficult at all to do that. That's what comes from coach and athlete relationships, and
Yeah.
again, you know, these parents, every parent knows their child better than any coach would as a person, of course, but I don't think parents understand or appreciate just the level of understanding of what coaches dive into the psychology of each of these kids and getting to know them. I mean, we make a commitment to understanding that kid so that I can make these decisions in the moment. And, it gets to where I can look at any one of the kids, as different as they are, and I know when that kid needs to be picked up in a moment, and I know when I might need to light his butt up right here. He can handle it. He's in the frame of that's what he needs right now. And those moments they come and go constantly throughout a season, and that's the coach's job. Pick the right, like you said, to mix the whipped cream with the shit.
Yeah.
And that's what great coaching is.
I think,
Yeah.
a lot of times too, if they understood the pain and suffering and heartache that we go through for their kids, and I don't know, I guess that's one of those things they maybe never will understand, but I think if they understood how much we care and how much we go through, how much sleep we lose, I think a lot of times, I think Augie Garrido said it, right? In that speech with a lot of explicitives and everything, but he talked about how you guys are going to go home tonight and you're going to be fine. But I've got to live with this, as a coach. And I think if parents sometimes understood what we take under our wings, and what we go through on a daily basis, I think it would make things a lot easier if they understood how much effort and time and pain and suffering that goes into being a coach.
Look, I have a parent from our team last year, this past summer, who I've known a really long time, who is unhappy, doesn't feel like we treated his kid fairly this year. And I haven't talked to him, he won't talk to me, but what I want to tell him is I don't think he realizes, Dylan, that when I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm thinking about his kid and how to make his kid better, right? Yeah, I don't know if it really matters to them. I mean, you're right. They don't understand that. They have no idea. Maybe they don't appreciate it. I don't know. Or maybe they do. Maybe they do know it. Maybe they do appreciate it, but don't care, right? Because you're still wrong as a coach, I guess. I don't know that it would really matter to them, but you're right. That is the truth. I absolutely lose sleep over how to make these kids better,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know.
And
It's funny, sorry, Kyle, not to
go ahead.
end around back to the beginning, what we said in the beginning, but I think maybe the high school coaches and beyond have it figured out. How do you solve all of this? You don't communicate with the parents.
Yeah.
Don't tell them anything. I mean, that's truth, You don't, I'm sure there's unhappy parents on high school teams, but you don't hear about it. You don't have any of the drama because the coaches don't care whether you're happy or not. Don't come to the game. Take your kid out, and I'm not saying, I don't know what I'm saying, but that's how you solve it all. Don't
Well, and
communicate.
something they don't have to deal with either is they don't have to worry about their kid going to another club, right? I mean, every once in a while they may change high schools, but that doesn't happen too often, right? So
Right. Yeah, so I think we can blame ourselves a lot, particularly me, because I overly communicated everything. The more you communicate, the more problems you have. Just don't tell them anything. If I went back and did it again, I wouldn't communicate anything to them.
Well,
yeah.
and that's probably We're running right at about an hour, so that might be a good thing to end it on. And that goes completely against my thing here about communicating more with parents. But I think it might go back to that same thing too. Maybe this 30% of the parents are the 30% that are way too involved, that are coaching from the sidelines, that are trying to, call the shots more than they should. Then you look at that differently, right? It's only 30% of the parents that think they need to communicate more. That means 70% seem to be okay
Yeah.
with the way it's going, and that's much more than half. So
That is.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hey, let me
Excellent.
ask
Yeah.
something real quick because I had this. It doesn't really have a lot to do with this topic, but it kind of does.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm just doing my usual thing. At this age, and this question's more so for Chris, but you can answer it too, Kyle. At this age, let's say 11, 12, 13. Well, let's say 9 to 13, because I'm going to speak for Brock too. What level of importance do you think the games, especially the tournaments, right? Because that's what they do, is tournaments. What level of importance that do the games have to determine their future versus practices?
Well, as a general statement, the games as a word are critical, okay, would be my answer. Critically important. The outcome of those games is completely irrelevant, if that's what you're asking. But the game themselves are paramount because that's competition, right? I can hit you 10,000 ground balls at practice. I can throw, and I have 350 pitches in a practice and let you hit. But until you get into a game situation against another kid your age who might hit you with that pitch, and you have all these other mental things going on in your head in a game, and you have the stands full of your parents and your grandparents and your girlfriend and all that. It's a different environment than a practice, and I think it means everything. I mean, that's your competition. Now, once again, the outcome of that game is completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
You know, um, yeah, that's my answer.
I do a little bit of research, or I'm doing some research where I use this thing called grit as a measurement instrument. So grit is defined as perseverance in the face of adversity and consistency of interest. And that ultimately, it goes into this whole equation, a success equation, to where you kind of look at these two components. Perseverance in the face of adversity can really only be developed or tested if there's consequences. And so, like you're saying, in a practice, there's not that many consequences necessarily. So it's really hard to measure that perseverance. So it's tough to know. And that's a very important part of developing grit. Consistency of interest. Now, that is sticking with something for a long period of time. And that might kind of dive into the practices a little bit too, to where you practice hours a day, day after day, but you're still interested. So just looking at this grit, this grit scale, again, I think the competition is critically important, like you said, Chris, to be able to measure and understand the athlete's perseverance. Can they handle the failure and just continue working through it?
Well, I'll say this. I mean, so, this so multifaceted, right? And practice satisfies the repetition that's needed to develop good habits, to develop the muscle memory and learn new things. The game is there to learn the competitiveness. And shoot, my mind just went completely blank here. Dead gummit. I forgot what I was going to say. There's something there for the game. Shoot, I'm going to have to come back to it. It's,
Well, I was just thinking about how much focus and it went back to my whole.
So now I remember what I was going to say. So, my first day of high school baseball, my high school coach, I think, is one of the greatest coaches ever. He's still coaching West Monroe right now. He's
Coach Wade Semino.
Semino is my high school coach.
He's probably watching. So,
and I
shout
think
out.
I'm gonna send it to him when we get done. I think he knew baseball before anybody else knew baseball, right? So my first day of high school baseball is the first time I ever heard this. He said baseball is a 98% mental, and I thought, this guy is crazy. What is he talking about? that it's 98% mental. But he's right. I mean, it is. I mean, what? Maybe it's 96, but you get the point. It's all mental, and it's what you're talking about, Kyle. It's perseverance. It's getting up after you get knocked down. You don't learn those things in practice. To Dylan's question, there you go. Look at you. I have one. I can't show it on.
It's on your butt.
Yeah, no, I don't. So, to your question, Dylan, you can't learn any of those things. That mental aspect of baseball, you cannot learn that in practice, is my opinion. It has to be in the scenario of a competition, which is the game.
There's a phrase I like to use, and it goes along with this somewhat, but you can't develop game confidence in practice. And it kind of goes to the same thing as you can practice all day long, but if you really, really want to develop as an athlete, you got to have those games. And I think the tournaments for that reason too. You think of like exposure. They use like an exposure response therapy for different types of things. If you're exposing kids to that many tournaments and games and competition, it should help to mitigate that emotional response, because it's like, man, we play games all the time. We're in tournaments all the time. So what's just another one? What's not this one here not working out the way we wanted, because I'm going to be playing all next weekend too.
Okay, shut up. I want to say something. That's exactly what I was getting at. That's exactly what I was getting at, is like the balance, right, of tournaments versus practice. That's kind of why I asked Chris that question, because I knew what the answer was, but I wanted him to say it so I could pivot back to this. It's like,
Dylan,
I know.
What?
I didn't buy that one either.
You didn't know what the answer was going to be, Dylan.
Yeah,
We
I
could
knew
see
he
it
was
on your
going to
face.
say the games are vital. I mean, of course, I know that answer, but I wanted to come back to, okay, what's too much, right? And what you just said, right? It's just another tournament, so no big deal. Well, it's actually not that. And that's what I'm seeing, is that they're playing too many tournaments. And I'm not saying you go all to practice and you don't, you go all to practice and don't do tournaments. I'm just thinking along the mindset of like, okay, where's that balance there? Because I feel like you go, even mental performance and physical performance can go here, but then it could be because you play way too many tournaments. So that's kind of where I was going with that. That's why I asked it.
But would that not be a way to really measure and determine that perseverance, right? Like these are kids. Push them to the edge now as far as games go. And then if they stick with it, right? If they stick with it next season, man, by the time they get to high school, they don't even know what losing means, because they've done it so much.
I think the answer to that. I really don't.
I think it goes beyond the like exposure therapy method, because of the fact that too much can lead to total exhaustion. It can lead to burnout. And I'm seeing it every single season. Right. And that doesn't mean that some of these kids that are getting burnt out aren't ever going to play pro ball or college ball or high school ball. Right. I think there's probably a balance that's different for every kid. Right? But at the same time, I think we definitely play too much. I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong, but
I'm thinking about it now, because I thought y'all were both going with that. Initially, I thought Kyle was talking more on the mental side of competition and the perseverance, and if
I was.
Yeah, we're on different pages every single day of our lives. So
and if we believe that the competition benefits the mental aspect of the game, well, then more is better. And then I thought, Dylan, your answer was originally speaking more on the physical side, which I completely agree with you, that it's too much, right? But I don't know. As you started talking, I'm thinking, I agree with you. I think these kids anyway, can reach a point of mental exhaustion as well. Absolutely. I do it with work. I mean, sometimes I just need to check out for a little bit. I'm kind of tired, mentally from business. So yeah, I think that's probably my answer, is that.
What's your thought on that, Kyle?
It's too much.
Which way am I? Which way am I supposed to go for you?
Oh, it doesn't matter. Yeah, just look at the camera. What's my thought? No, absolutely. Yeah, there can be mental fatigue and mental burnout and pushing too much like that. I think there's a lot of times youth burnout has more to do with communication and messages they're getting, right? If they're being pushed too hard and they don't feel as supported, that tends to more so lead to burnout. But because I would think again of my kid who's only 6, like he wouldn't know the difference between games and practice, right? So you just put him in a game every day of his life and he's just going to love it. But as they start to get older and there's a little bit more weight with that, then yeah, there could definitely be some burnout.
So it depends.
And just mental fatigue in general.
So
That can come from
your
it.
answer is depends, as usual. It depends.
It should be depends, yeah.
I think that's part of the incumbent on the coaches to, mitigate against that by the environment that we create, right? I had a kid who parents were mentally fatigued. They were ready to be done with it. He wasn't having a tremendous amount of success by their standards or not standards, but their definition of success. I thought the kid was doing great. I thought the only way that he wouldn't reach his potential was if he quit. Then, you're guaranteeing that you're going to fail now. But I think you're doing just fine. You just need to keep doing it. And, my understanding is that they completely left it up to the kid. And I'm not entirely sure if mom and dad even agreed. One wanted one thing, the other one wanted something else. Let's just say, and it's not exactly what I'm saying, but let's just say that this kid, he had a lot of reasons to quit, and a lot of adults maybe wouldn't have blamed him, right? But I will give us credit as a team and coaches of creating an environment like you're talking about, Kyle, where this kid's answer was, there's no way I'm quitting. Absolutely not. He knew he was having these failures. He's not dumb. He's aware that he's struggling. And he said that there was just no way he was going to quit. He was going to come back, because even though he was having those failures, as coaches and as a team, I think we nurtured that in a weird way. I don't know if that's the right way to say that. And I'm going to tell you, he came back and he had his best, by far, his best year ever. And it was incredible to watch. And it was because of that, because of the coaches. I'm not taking all the credit for it, maybe a little bit, but, we recognized what you're talking about, Kyle, and I don't know. I just think we created the right environment to where he had every reason to be fatigued, but he wasn't.
Yeah, and I think you should take credit for it, because what I know about you so far, I absolutely think you're responsible for building that type of an environment. Kids need to know that it's okay to fail, right? They're not their self-worth is not put on that, and if they're continuously reinforced in things that they're doing, I don't think there is as much burnout. Dylan, going back to your question though, now that I think about it, your kids don't have seasons. Your kids get 2 weeks off a year or something like that. So yeah, that's different. So I guess I'm thinking of this as like in a season,
like a single season of baseball,
slamming them with games and tournaments might not. It might be okay. It might be what they need. It might help build that resilience and that perseverance and that type of stuff. However, your guys are a little bit different. So that one, you're probably right.
Yeah.
All right. So it's about an hour and 15 minutes. That anybody have anything else to add to that? I think there's a lot there. Hopefully people can listen to this, parents especially, and maybe start to understand a little bit more from y'all's perspectives of the coaches and everything that y'all go through.
I got something. What about Tony Vitello going to freaking San Francisco Giants?
Man,
how crazy is that?
So glad he left Tennessee. I hope they lose every game.
Dude, he had it made there. What are you thinking? What is he thinking?
If you can't look at Nick Saban and think, maybe I'll just stay where I'm at and just be, look, I'm not a fan of Tennessee, but the guy's obviously a pretty good coach, right? And Nick Saban was on record as saying it's the worst mistake he ever made was going to the professional route, So I think he's foolish,
Well, at that level, to me, maybe he thinks he can make a change, and maybe he can, but it's highly doubtful. A lot of these guys, you're a babysitter as an MLB coach. You're not coaching anymore. You're a babysitter. I have 2 professional MLB coach friends that both said the same exact thing. You are a babysitter. You're not coaching anymore.
I've got cool friends too, Dylan.
Well, they're with the Canes organization. That's the only reason I know.
I don't think his brand of baseball works at the MLB level. I just don't. I mean,
Well, I mean, he is cocky and arrogant, and that's what they are. So
got a good MLB coaching little nugget for you here. Chad was telling me this. So Chad said he asked. I mean, obviously he played in the big leagues for a long time, but he was talking to one of the first base coaches on some team. I don't know. And he says, "Hey, what do you tell these guys when they get to first base? Like, what are you going to tell a big leaguer who's on first base?"
yeah,
He's telling the same thing you're telling your 8-year-olds. One out, go halfway. Yeah, I mean, what else are you going to tell him? He said it was crazy for him to hear a big league coach say, "I'm telling him the same thing. 2 outs, you're moving on contact."
It's crazy, man.
And they know what's going on. You're just reminding them of the situation. That's what you're doing.
Yeah. That's a dumb move, man. I think it's a dumb move. I cannot believe dude, he had it made at Tennessee. Like,
Dylan, we're not MLB analysts.
I mean, I want to be.
It's a bad move. I agree. I'm thrilled. Although I'm not. I wasn't scared of Tennessee, but hey, those guys, they're good.
They're always good. They're always good.
Didn't like his brand of baseball. Glad to see him. No. I've heard he's a good guy from people that do know him. Say he's a great guy.
I'm sure he is. He just did that to make an impact and be different, right? I mean, he was definitely different than any coach there's ever been. There's a couple similarities, right, between him and other coaches, but man, the amount of cocky and arrogance that started with him and streamed down to all his players is unbelievable.
I don't like it. I mean, look, I never blamed Nick Saban. Of course, I'm an LSU guy. I didn't blame him. No, nobody really blamed him. The allure of doing what you do on a professional level, who would turn that down? Nobody.
Yeah.
Right? You have that opportunity, you have to go do it. So I get it. But in Vitello's case, Nick Saban and other guys have made that mistake and said, I would never do that again.
I think I look at it too as monetarily, right? You're going to California. You're going to be paying over half your freaking taxes to the state.
I don't think they paid me enough to move there.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to California. You're losing money there. And then you had it made, no matter where you went in Tennessee, you could do whatever you want. You probably didn't have to spend barely any money there. He was getting paid just as much as he's probably going to get paid in the MLB. And I cannot see him being a success in the MLB. So why would you leave such a great opportunity that you've had for this long where everybody loves you?
Dylan, and I know, outside of the podcast, we've talked about having the other guy on here that we always mention. I would love to get his take on this.
Yeah.
He's just gonna, he's gonna have the right take on whether he's gonna make it at the professional level. I don't purport to know what it takes to be an MLB coach.
No.
He may end up being the best ever. I don't know.
Yeah, you never know. I'd
love to hear what Chad has to say about that. I'm gonna call him and ask him.
All right.
Okay. Yeah,
I appreciate you guys' time, and we'll see you all again next week, maybe, or whenever we have you back on, Chris, which is hopefully again sometime soon.
I'm gonna be traveling, but I can do it by my phone, I believe.
And we can figure something out. All right, guys, y'all enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
See y'all.